let's push on to the team that we should know hopefully better than any other. That is the Wallabies in Australia, obviously. What are your first thoughts about where Australia are at?
I think it's just a case of too many players used, too much shuffling, like 42 players in, what's that, 5 tests. It's pretty crazy how many have had to come in and get changed. And, we've had 7 debuts already this year. It's a lot of blooding when we've already done, I think 20 players previously under Rennie. So it's a lot of shuffling pieces. I think we've got a lot of talent at the moment, but one of our biggest issues is just we've had no opportunity to see what our best team actually looks like. I don't think we've had a single test where we've had what anyone would consider our best 23 available. Maybe arguably one of the tests against South Africa last year. We were looking pretty close to that. But yeah, it's just becoming harder and harder to see what that team should look like, because as soon as we see a good game from, say, Neville, he gets injured and Frost gets a chance to debut. And then as soon as Frost has a few good games, Arnold comes back, and we're sort of shuffling around quite a lot to see what our best team should look like. So for me, the big thing to summarize Australia is we've had all this time to develop set combinations. And I think we've done nearly everything except our locks and outside backs. I don't think we know our best outside back combo. I don't think we know our best lock combo either. So they're probably my 2 areas for concern at the moment. But yeah, we're scrambling to sort of fill in all the injuries, and we're doing reasonably well. But that last result is so embarrassing that there really needs to be a massive statement in a fortnight's time.
Yeah, I think you're right with the just the absolute massive injury toll. It's out of control. Obviously, anyone that listens to this probably looks on social media, and the team's been posted up everywhere about injured 23 or injured 15. There's just so many top line Aussie players that have been injured now. It's hard to see how we can kind of get any kind of consistency with that. There's been 3 concussions, I think, in the last couple of weeks, midweek. So it's going to be really interesting to see if we can get our 7 or 8 players back this week against South Africa, how much of a change that makes. My only worry is that the players we're getting back are in the forward pack, where we're probably not being as outdone, not in the backs. The only backs that we got coming back are Paisami and Kellaway, who sure enough will give us a bit of depth and solidify our combinations a little bit more. But it's still asked the question. We're still going to be asking ourselves the question. Kurtley Beale is maybe one choice coming back for fullback, but he was originally targeting the New Zealand games. Then you've got Andrew Kellaway coming back from injury, who, of course, we all rate as this really controlled, composed player at international level, but he still hasn't been playing consistently at fullback. So when we've got holes over how we're kind of communicating and covering the backfield, it's a real worry to see that we don't actually have any specialist fullbacks in the squad, barring Campbell, who's not getting a look in, to actually try and cover that back 3. And all I can see them doing at the moment is putting Kellaway to 15 and putting Tom Wright or Patire at 14. But I just don't think that's going to fix our problem there at the moment. I don't really know what those... If I was the outside backs, put it this way, all I'd be doing in training at the moment is taking high balls and working out a communication and where we need to be defensively so that the field is covered. Like, how from a set piece, Argentina kick a 50-22 and we don't look like chasing it down is absolutely beyond me. Like, what the hell are they covering?
Yeah, and this is a big issue. And something I think, we were even talking about last year is that there needs to be that consistency in these players playing 15 for their club team or playing a lot of minutes there at test level just so they can get used to it. When we look through the club options, Banks, I don't know why he chose to sign overseas at this time. Like, I get that there's a financial incentive, but he's got to know that he's not one of the 3 players getting picked.
Yeah.
And so, that's just a complete waste. That happens. We're either fighting tooth and nail to keep him till 2023 and then, he can go overseas after. Or we're like, okay, well, let's get Tom Wright or someone else at fullback just so we can develop that, because that's clearly an area of weakness. Wright's played no Super Rugby at fullback, really other than maybe a few minutes when there's been injuries, but that's a massive issue. Then Kellaway, who's our next best option, is getting looked over. Hodge, who was playing fullback, over him at club level, which again is another issue. And then I look to the
Kellaway was playing centre for the bulk of the year.
Yeah, that's it just makes no sense how we're choosing to run these options. Patire's getting looked as a fullback, plays, I think, 3 games at fullback for the Reds maybe, and shuffled around. And then on that Australian tour, there's only 4 players that were healthy that didn't get looked at, and 2 of them are outside backs. Like, why would take Vunivalu and Campbell over if they're not going to get any minutes or any, time to develop their as potential right wing or fullback option. So
it does beg the question: what actually had to happen for Campbell to get game time? Like, in what situation were they considering using him?
And again, like one of my big concerns was Pasama got injured, so Fekete starts. I'm happy with that, and we go back to a 5-3 split. Why are we putting Simone and Hodge on the bench who can both cover centre? Neither real wingers. Hodge clearly isn't looked at as our first choice outside back or fullback option. So why are we not putting either Vunivalu or Campbell on there just to get a taste and see, okay, these guys can come on and deliver. Let's run with them in future tests. Like, to me, that made no sense. So we've got a real problem there. I think Callaway to fullback and right to wings maybe the safest bet, because they seem like the ones that could stay there for the long term if they stay injury free. And at their best, they look quite good. But yeah, we don't have a settled option. It is a real concern. My only hope is that Paisami coming back means O'Connor and Paisami can play together, and they've got at least that little bit of familiarity from the Reds setup. And even then, Paisami plays 13 a lot of the time. To me, we really just need to nail down combinations in Super Rugby should match up with combinations in Test Rugby. And it's arguments that I've seen people already have with Game Line Analytics over the weekend, because I was saying how the New Zealand team won with 8 Crusaders players out there and a lot of Tasman Marcos. And people would argue, well, we had 7 Brumbies out there, but they weren't set combinations, or they weren't in those set positions. So maybe the introduction of Paisami and getting Pataya on the bench for impact might have some benefit, because at the moment the outside backs really aren't clicking. It's probably my biggest concern is just how many points they leaked against a team that didn't create enough pressure to leak that many points.
Well, we've talked about outside back, but you dropped in James O'Connor there as well. The scary thing for me is that we have 3, when fit, fly halves that we have no idea how good they each are in a settled side. Like, we seem to be dropping each one in for 1 or 2 games, taking them out again, and then you don't see them for the next 4 to 6 weeks. And because of that, everyone's saying, Quade's definitely the top choice. I don't know that he definitely is. Like, even the first half that he played, they all say, we've won 6 or 7 in a row with Quade at fly half. The bloke got injured early in the game, 42 minutes or whatever it was, and we were down when he left the field, and then we came back and won with Hodge there. Like, how we're attributing that to Quade Cooper's influence, I don't understand. The bloke played well, made a good line break, made a good kick-in play, also threw away 2 stupid passes to give away possession. Once on their line when we should have scored a try, but he threw a dumb offload to Slipper, and another one right at the start of the game to put us under pressure to start the match. Like, I don't think yet that he has the actual settled play to consistently play as the fly half that we want him to be. I'm not saying that he's not the 10, but he definitely hasn't shown me that he's so far ahead and shoulders above everybody else. Noah Lalesio, we know, is a developing 10, and James O'Connor hasn't really had much of an opportunity other than whatever that dog's breakfast was on the weekend, which, to be honest, I don't really think he had much control over. I think it was just the back 3 being completely lost. So either way, I don't think we're learning anything. I feel like we're 12 months further down the line from where we were last year, and all we know is that Quade Cooper's around still. That's it. That's all we've learned.
To me, that's my biggest concern is we needed to have had some clear direction about what we were going to do with fly half, because we gave it to Lalesio during the French series last year, and that he got a win. I thought, okay, we'll give him some confidence, and I thought Cooper's coming back. That's great. He did a good job against South Africa and Argentina, but we didn't give Lalesio any time to develop with him or off the bench. So in all those wins, he wasn't featured on the bench once. We had Hodge or O'Connor. Lalesio didn't come back into the picture until the England game at the end of last year, in which he got a few minutes off the bench only because of other injuries. So it was just, I think we've done a really poor job of actually establishing what the plan is with Lalesio. Because he could be our starting fly half, because he seems to be the only one that's, not injury prone at the moment. So, to me, that's a big issue. I think getting the 10 sorted and their 12 combo when Kravi's not there is going to be massive, because Kravi's, he's proven he's the best. He's our best option, but he's also not going to be available every single game. We're already seeing flaws in the picking 3 overseas picks, because Arnold's not going to be here for all of the rugby championship. In Argentina, some of their players aren't coming across because they've got to go back to European duties. It's a real issue that these overseas picks, they're not guaranteed to play every match. So, yeah, I would like to see just consistency. If we're backing O'Connor, awesome. Let's just keep playing him. If we're backing Alaalatoa, let's also keep playing him. But at the moment, I think the longest stretch of tests in a row is maybe 5 from Cooper. And otherwise, we're just chopping and changing. And that's not good enough for, the key position where, we should be building our team from.
Yeah, look, I'm 100% with you. I think the fact that they won't continually pick Alessio says that they're not convinced he's there yet and they want to develop him. But when the other top choice at the moment is James O'Connor, who also isn't settled, I think you do need to pick and stick. And then, if there's an injury, albeit Alessio comes in and steers the ship for the rest of the season. But I think they've just got to pick and stick Jock and then play from there. So hopefully we see him for the rest of the rugby champs, just starting every single week for me. Alessio maybe to get a few minutes off the bench, as you said, but the way we use that bench at the moment, I'd be surprised if we actually did give him that opportunity there. You talked about the international players. Rory Arnold, not only will he not go on the Northern Hemisphere tour, but as you kind of touched on, he's not going to be available to play in New Zealand because his new Japanese club wants him back. I'm sorry, but they signed him knowing that he's playing for Australia. Why are we now saying that we need to release him in an international window to keep them happy? It's just ridiculous to me. He's actually just turning down the Wallabies now and taking the money. I don't get it.
I don't get why we're being nice either. It's always just like, oh yeah, it's that good faith so that, they keep sending players over. But we've got every right to keep him. So why are we placating the nonsense that they need to see what he's like? Like, they paid all the money because they know he's a world-class player. We know he's a world-class player, which is why we picked him in the squad. It's just a mess. And as people are rightly pointing out, he was not overly good on the weekend. It was fine. He did his job in the lineouts and scrums fine enough, but he didn't look like $1 million player out there. We could have easily have had Matt Phillip or, Nick Frost out there performing that role. The challenge now is he's only got 2 more games before he's gone again. Are we getting that investment? We needed him to be there for the full 6 matches of the Rugby Championship with the 2 weeks beforehand, with the weeks in between, so he can get used to the systems. Because otherwise, he's not really having the desired effect. He's a freak for Toulouse because he has 30 games a season with them.
Yeah.
To me, the whole selection of players has been so messy. I think the handling of it last year with the end of year tour when everyone just started pulling out, Sean McMahon left, Quade Cooper left, it was just a mess. I thought 2022 they'll fix it. They've got the clear rule, and they're just proving no, it's still messy. So, yeah, look, it pisses me off. I'd rather we just pick the players that are domestically playing, and they just play to form. And if we happen to get them and they're in freakish form, like a Karevi, then they just slot right back in.
I think the relationship they're talking about saving, going back to your first point, is not between Australian Rugby and the Japanese club. It's between the Japanese club and the player who they are employing, that they're trying to stay on the good side. But why are we letting them sign players when the precedent is being set that despite them being available for the Wallabies in the international windows, we're only going to take them for 3 games?
Yeah.
It actually sets the worst precedent because it undermines the international eligibility the window where you have to be able to give up your players. Like, if people start doing that, then we may as well throw that rule out the window. It makes absolutely no difference. As I said, to come back to it, Rory Arnold signed this contract with that Japanese club knowing that he should be available for the Wallabies for all of the international window. So then why are we pandering to this idea that he's not actually needing to be available for all of them? It makes no sense. And I dare say that Rory Arnold has 2 games to play his heart out. Otherwise, I don't think he'll play at the World Cup. As you said, we have enough other locks that we can pick someone else. Skelton will get an opportunity at the back end of the year. Isaac Rodder still to come back into the side. Darcy Swain is playing the house down. Matt Phillip is a very solid option in Australia. I actually think if we only allowed 3 players on the Giddo law, which I believe will stay, I don't think they'll change it. I reckon he's got 2 games to give himself a shot at the World Cup. Otherwise, he's done for. And I think it's his own doing.
Yeah. And that's probably the big issue for me, is that we've got still not a settled side completely. We've tested all these options. Rennie's used 63 players since he's taken over, and 25 of them have played 5 or less games. There's a lot that have just sort of been makeshift players or just filled in for games here or there. We're still developing, which is all well and good. If I could play like Fiketti, he might get more caps and become an established centre, which is awesome. But we've just had to chop and change so much and so frequently that there's just been no I guess, ability to build what should be a really settled sort of 30-man squad. And the Giteau law, the 3-man overseas law, just isn't helping at the moment because we're not getting these players for long enough to actually see if they're, in contention. Like 3 tests for Skelton off the bench last week where we took Phillip and Swain to Europe and they played nothing. Was that useful? Did that benefit at all? Like there's some real issues with that. So I want them to iron that out.
On that point, who's your international picks for the Northern Hemisphere tour? Let's call that now, because obviously Quaid unavailable, Karevi unavailable, Arnold unavailable, who are our original 3, along with Corambetti, who is also unavailable, I believe, as well.
Yeah, it's tough. So we want some European-based players, and for me, I probably wouldn't be going for all 3. The ones I'd be looking at is Brendon Pangaremosa. He's someone that I think could be a decent option, just because I've never, well, no, I shouldn't say never. I'm not currently a fan of Lachie Lonergan. I don't think he's, a test match ready hooker just yet. He did an okay job for someone that hadn't started test match before. But for me, I think he's just got to keep developing in Super Rugby. He's still quite young. He doesn't have the big body. He is quick. But that's not really what you need in Test Rugby for a hooker. So I want Brendon Pangaremosa to come back as that 3rd hooker. I thought he had some good form under Rennie. Outside of that, some of the options you could look at is maybe like a Richie Arnold if we were facing another lock shortage. Or if Hooper's still not right to play, you might consider a Liam Gill or Colby Fainga, someone that's, an out-and-out 7 that's plenty experienced. But I don't think we'll be racing to fill those positions. I think, we should be trusting domestically and not thinking we need to use all 3, just because we can, but only doing it if we don't have the options locally that can fill that void.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually don't think they'll fill all of them. I think Skelton's the one that they will pick. But BPA, my worry for that is the only reason I'd be picking him is to see if he could be a potential late inclusion in the World Cup squad if there's an injury. Like, I agree with you. I think he needs to be above Lachie Lonergan, and therefore he needs to understand the system for the World Cup next year. But I'd still be picking Parecki and Fenga, who are in Australia, over him, in which case he's your 3rd choice hooker, and we're bringing him into a squad. And potentially if we're giving him game time, then that means it's disrupting the development of the other guys. So really, I only want him around the squad so he understands what we're doing. So if we get to an injury crisis at a World Cup, we're not picking Lonnie Lonergan as our starting hooker in a World Cup semi-final when he's, 22 years of age or whatever it is. Yeah. So I don't mind it there, but I really probably don't even want to see him get any game time other than maybe off the bench if we do. Will Skelton, I mentioned, I think deserves a bit of a run, but only if we're serious about picking him as that big body player that he is. And it's quite clear that he needs to spend time in the system consistently if he's going to be good. We can't be picking him for 3 games and then dropping him back out and expecting him to do this phenomenal role that he's done with some of these club sides, same as Rory Arnold. And Richie Arnold, I don't know, he's not even a Wallaby, is he? Like, do we really need to bring in another locking option to see what they can do? I just think it's going to create more problems than it fixes. So I'm with you. I think Will Skelton for sure, which you didn't say, but I'm going to say, yep. And also I'm going to go with BPA as a 3rd option. Yeah. But on that note, let's push